with Dark Rangers Inc. and welcome back to part 2 of our N.i.n.a series, where today we're really going to show you how to actually image with this. And I'm not only going to show you how to gather your lights, but also your calibration frames as well. It's actually super simple. I'm also going to include some templates that I got from Patriot Astro's channel, and I customized them myself, and I'll go through those as we go through the video. I did say that I would address any comments or questions I got between videos, and the first one was why the Eagle? What are the pros and benefits of using this versus a traditional mini PC with something like a Pegasus power box? And I'll go over a lot of the features that I really love during the video. That way we can get into the action quicker. But just a really quick overview of the reason why I'm really doing this video for folks that are wanting to transition from ZWO and the ASI Air into N.i.n.a, or folks that are maybe just looking to get into the hobby in general, but specifically for people that are used to an all-in-one box that can do everything. This basically can do the same thing. So for simplicity's sake, I am absolutely not against the mini PC power box combination. And in the future, I'll probably do something like that just to show you guys how I would set it up. But there are about 4 or 5 things that this can do that a mini PC may not be able to do unless you add some additional attachments. One of my favorite is the fact that it has a built-in sky quality meter that's constantly measuring the Bortle class and the SQM number. So it's like having one of these pointing out the front with this camera at all times, but the rest we'll get into as we're imaging. The second was around the price of the setup. You guys were basically making fun of me, saying like, are you broke? Are you okay? And so I'm gonna address that today with a little bit of an upgrade with one of the partners of the channel that I announced a month ago, which is Stellarvue. They make awesome handmade scopes, and the new scope for the channel is gonna be the Stellarvue SVXT 140. It's kind of their souped up version of the 130. They didn't make it any longer focal length. They just made it faster, so it's f6.7. And they are working on a full frame reducer for that that's gonna come out later this year, and I will be one of the first people to test it. And so I'm really excited to introduce that. So really quickly, let's show you that, and then we'll jump out and get to imaging. All right, buddy, it's been nice, but time to sub you out. All right, well, as you can see, the sun is setting. We got all the scopes uncovered. And if it's your first night with the new setup, now is a good time to make sure that you have rough focus. The last thing that we haven't connected from part 1 is the mount itself. So we're gonna go ahead and connect the G11, make sure we can slew it around, and then get some good focus using the main camera and also the OAG. So we'll pick some distant trees out there and we'll make sure we're at least close. And that way we have everything we can set up before nighttime comes, and it's less of a panic. This is also where it's nice to have the altitude meter inside the Eagle itself, because we know that we're at 42 degrees of latitude here. So ahead of time, I can get that really close, and then using the compass on my phone, make sure that I'm like within 1 degree or so, making the polar alignment much easier. It's not only a lot faster when you start from a close position, but it's also more accurate. If you start way off, N.i.n.a will even give you the warning that you want to start a little bit closer to have an accurate polar alignment. If you're, 10 or 15 total degrees off, the likelihood of you getting a super dialed polar alignment isn't great. If you can start within 1 or 2 degrees, the likelihood's pretty strong. All right, guys, before we jump into the full night of imaging, I just want to show you how quick and easy this is once you've already got it set up. I'm not going to lie, this episode is a little bit of a grind. Sometimes, we just got to go step by step, and it's a little bit longer episode. But I want to kind of show you what the end result is going to be and why this is going to be so awesome in the long run once you know how to do everything that's in the episode and you have an understanding and you're able to set up a night of imaging. So, here we are, we're connected to remote desktop. We open up N.i.n.a. If I wanted to go ahead and image the same target that I did last night, all I'd really have to do is go over to the advanced sequencer, open this up, and don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do all of this, but I just want to show you, go to my saved template, and then hit play. That's it, and I'm done. Like, I can go do whatever I want. It is going to set up everything that we need to happen, and it's going to run all night. I'm going to wake up to a hard drive full of images and the scope at home in the right position. So hopefully that motivates you. It takes about 15 seconds, but in order to get there, it's going to take about a half hour for me to show you how to do all that. So stay tuned. All right, we're inside and it's 7:40 on April 15th. So we are probably just at sunset or a little bit past after we took the scope covers off. We're now inside. I'm upstairs, and I normally do this on my iPad, but so that I could screen record, I'm going to do it on the MacBook, actually for the first time. And I was trying to figure out how to video it and do all this with the screen recording and try to sync it up. And I felt like the easiest way to do it is basically just take it through exactly the way I'm going to for an actual imaging session. And I'm not saying that I do it the perfect way or the most efficient or optimal way, but it's been working out well, and I've been doing it this way for a couple months. And again, the big thing will be using the template for Advanced Sequencer, so look for those in the description. Before we get started though on actually N.i.n.a, I did want to show you, if you have your computer and you're not able to connect, sometimes it can be under your network and internet and going under the advanced sharing. Just make sure that you're public and private. Make sure you have these the network discovery on your public if you want to use it through your actual home Wi-Fi. So I'm actually now not hooked up via the Eagle's internal Wi-Fi. I'm actually using all now the Wi-Fi from my home. So now we are in remote desktop, obviously, because I'm on a MacBook, and this is clearly a Windows background. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is connect to the one piece of equipment that we haven't in the first episode, and that's the mount. So if you saw my review of the mount, this will be no surprise. I'm going to double click on the Gemini app. This is for the Losmandy G11, and I'm just going to simply connect. Now I could do a warm restart or from the CWD position, which is center weight down. Since that's where it is, I will just click on that. You'll see it say stop, and when it says disconnect, that's when we know that we're connected, and we'll see some numbers start to appear here when it kind of realizes, you know, where it's at and whatnot. So we'll let that kind of get going. In the meantime, I will open up N.i.n.a. I don't know that you need to do that first, but I just figured I'd show you about yep, and there we go. So now we are connected. It says disconnect. We can slew the mount this way with these 4 arrows. The reason I bring this up is because all mounts will have some kind of hub like this, whether it's, you know, the ZWO1 or the Pegasus or whatever brand you're using. Almost all of them have it. You can control it from in here, but you're also going to be able to control it in N.i.n.a, and that's what we're going to do. So I have a profile for the SVX140T. It'll come with a default. You can open it up that way and change all the different settings that you want. We can kind of go through some of those briefly, but basically you'll go into the little gear cog, and basically you'll see that here and there. Anytime you want to adjust settings, you know, look for the cog icon. So you can go in there, and you can even change, you know, the color scheme. I don't know why. I'm not like a huge green guy, but for some reason the Persian was kind of the least annoying to me. Put in the name, the description, and then just make sure that you have something in the Sky Survey and that your Sky Atlas is connected. You can even change the font if you want. You can manually put in this if it's your first time. I have it synced up with the GPS from the Eagle, but you can also just simply type this in by, you know, just Googling your current latitude and longitude in decimal format and your elevation. Custom horizon is going to be basically a video in and of itself, and Patriot Astro does have a good video on that and on all of this. This is just kind of a little bit of an update since nothing has been put out in a while and there have been some advances. So then you can go through, and what's a little bit confusing is there's an equipment page here, and then there's also an equipment tab there. So this is the settings equipment. So we're now in equipment tab under settings. So we have my camera, 3.7 micron, the scope with the focal length and the ratio, the mount. The settle time after slew, I have it at 5 seconds. You can make it longer or shorter. And the location at sync. So when they do connect, you can have it prompt or sync automatically. The prompt is basically going to ask, do you want the scope to sync to N.i.n.a or N.i.n.a to sync the location to the scope? So I just have it set up to prompt, and then coordinate and time sync. Now, weather app key, you can go onto whatever app key you like and choose the local station nearest you, and it'll have a little API key and throw that in there. I use the weather data on this one off of my Eagle and off of the Ultimate Power Box V3 on my other N.i.n.a setup. Autofocus. This is kind of important if you are on the fine focus side, which I have the Primaluce Sesto Senso set up on the fine focus side. You're going to want a bigger step size, obviously, because it's a 10:1. And you want it to be big enough that it moves it enough so that it can get that parabolic curve when it's trying to find autofocus. So on the fine side, 200-ish, I've done this on a couple scopes, is usually pretty good, plus or minus maybe 50. You can play around in that area. And then if you're on the coarse side, it can be anywhere from 15 to 50. It just depends, but those are some good ranges to start off with. Maybe start with 25 on the coarse side, and you should be at least in the ballpark. I'm doing 3 seconds because I'm doing all broadband. So if I'm using a narrowband filter, I might bump that up to 5, but for now. And then focus settle time, I do give it like 4 seconds because sometimes the motor, when it turns, can kind of, jar the guiding, especially if you have OAG, because it's going to mess with the focus just a little bit on the actual camera, the guide camera itself. So I give a little bit of a, 4 or 5 seconds, I think is pretty good. Number of exposures per point. You can change this to 2 if you want. 1 seems to work really well. I don't mess with anything else. There is basically no backlash on the Sesto Senso, and you'll be able to see that. I can show you an autofocus curve and show you what that would look like on the curve, but from the first point to the second, you can see that the focus changes immediately, and it's pretty much equal to every other change. So to me, there's no backlash when I use like the ZWO1. There's much less focus change from the first to second, so it's clear there is backlash. And so maybe you could put in a little bit of compensation for that, maybe put like 5 or 10 just to compensate for that a little bit. In terms of the curve strategy, there's a number of different ones you can try out. I'm on hyperbolic right now. Works well for me. Number of attempts 1, and then the threshold 0.7. Usually the higher the number, the more ideal it has to be, and kind of the more picky it is. My results end up being better than 0.7, but I still want it to take it if it's at 0.7, because that's still going to be a pretty decent autofocus. I don't have a dome, so I don't have anything in there. And then the file settings, you can change it if you don't want FITS, if you want TIFF or XISF. I use FITS so that I can stack an APP if I want. And then you can have all of these FITS headers added on there. I have pretty much stock. I don't think I've added much. Sometimes I will add if I'm going to do a high gain mode or something like that. And then the meridian flip settings, I just have it to 5 minutes after the meridian, and haven't changed much else in there. And then going down to plate solve, I have ASTAP for both. You can choose a secondary one, which you might want to, and then you want to make sure under that it actually takes you to the astap.exe. So you have to find that in your file folder or it will not work. I bumped the search radius up a little bit to 50 because I'm at a higher focal length. It just seems to work better. And then my exposure time, I have it 4 seconds for plate solve. That will usually work with narrowband or broadband. And then the current filter is just current. So whatever filter is live, that's what it's going to use. And then the tolerance just to 1 arc minute for pointing and then 1 degree for rotation. I do have a camera rotator on this, the Pegasus Falcon V2, the new one. And then on the number of attempts, the delay between attempts, I did drop this down to like 0.1 seconds. If it does fail, I think the standard setup is like a minute or 2. I don't want it to wait 2 minutes before it tries again. I just want to wait, 0.1 minute, a few seconds, and then give it another go. So then what I would normally do is go up to the equipment tab up here and we just fire everything up like we did at the end of the first video. If you're using something for the first time, it's usually good to hit this gear icon. So for example, if I go into the Gemini one and I pull that up, it's going to look a little bit different, but they're all basically the ASCOM driver. And you can see down here, they're showing that they are connected. And then if we go to actual Gemini, it's still connected. You can see the numbers are all moving in real time. And it's obviously connected here. I can move the mount, send it home. I'm gonna change the tracking to sidereal, and you can see all of the information from that. Guiding, it's still a little light out, so my guide camera is probably gonna show bright white, depending on, so probably have to wait a little bit for that to set up guiding. That's fine. We'll just hide that. In PhD2, so guiding doesn't open the equipment. It opens whatever guide program you're using. I'm using PhD2, and that's what I recommend. You can set up the actual camera by clicking on this little icon down here, and that will bring up both your mount and your guide camera. So you just connect both of them in there, assuming that you've installed the drivers, which we went over in the first part. The switches, if you have a power box like the power box V3 or the Eagle, you can turn this on and you can control all of the switches that I basically can in here, but you can do a lot of them from within N.i.n.a. And the nice thing about doing it in here is then you can program it in your advanced sequence. For me, I do have a flat panel, so I'm gonna turn that on and I'm actually going to open it because that's acting as my lens cap. You can see it saves all my flat settings from when you run Flat Wizard, which is right over here. We can go over that after we go through the imaging session. Weather, I'm going to use the Eagle's temperature sensor, dew point sensor, and then I control, there's a little temperature probe that goes from the Eco into the dew strap, and I can tell it that I want it, let's say 15 Celsius is right around 60 degrees. I think it's between 55 and 60 degrees. I know the dew point's 34, so that's well above that. And the probe from the Eagle going in, tucked into the dew strap, will monitor that and it'll adjust the power accordingly. Like right now it's only at 3.4 volts. It'll go all the way up to 11.5. It's not having to give it any power right now because the outside temperature is 60 degrees. So the outside temperature is already warmer than I have it set. So it's not really sending any power right now. And for me, that's it. I don't have a dome and I don't have any safety monitoring stuff. So that's everything that I turn on. And then the first thing that I usually do, especially if you're brand new and you're setting it up for the first time, is I go into this circle right here, which is the imaging layout. Now, for a lot of you guys, the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is the 3-point polar alignment. Again, you get to the 3-point polar alignment, you're gonna go to the puzzle, which is your plugins. Click on the little globe. You're really gonna wanna use this 3-point polar alignment. It's awesome, it's free. You just click on it, and then there's a little install button, hit install, and it's gonna do the 3-point polar alignment just like the experimental one in the ASI Air. If you're using it, it's totally automated. It's about as easy as it possibly can get. But the first thing that you're gonna wanna do, we got rough focus outside on the tree branches. We're gonna wanna just take an image. So that's gonna be this one all the way on the right up here. And I don't know why I had it on 30 seconds, but we'll just take the luminance filter, 3 seconds, and you can loop this if you're trying to, manually get focus close. Looping it's not a bad idea. We don't need to loop it, but I need to expose the little aperture blades, and it's gonna take just an image, and I think it'll be dark enough to see a star. Maybe not, it's getting there. So it's stretching it. As you can see, flats were needed. No stars yet, might be a little too bright still. But we would see some stars start to appear there. Let's go to 5 seconds. That'd be the first thing I would do. I would, go ahead and make sure that a star is there, and then the focuser is going to be over here. So I can kind of quickly go through all these ones at the top. The furthest right is the imaging. Plate solving is the one that looks kind of like it. It's confusing. It's a couple over. This is the image history. So this will allow you to see all of your images that you've shot for the night. As you can see, we have none so far. Your autofocus routine, there's my last autofocus routine. So you can see this one was 0.98. The one is basically perfect, so it's about as close to perfect as you can get. It stores your previous autofocus routine. So you can see from my first to my second point, it's almost perfectly linear. There's no real delay. What it'd look like if you had backlash in your autofocus is this point would be here, and then the second point would be like maybe right here. It wouldn't be straight down below it, and that's because backlash is basically just slack in the motor. So there's either slack in the motor or your focus system, but with the Feather Touch, there really isn't much slack in there. So between the motor and the focuser itself, there's no backlash in the system. You can kind of go through each of these. A lot of these are the same things that we just saw in the equipment tab. So you have your image, you can shrink that, hide it, or make it visible. Your camera stats, it's right here. So cooling, we can turn cooling on from here. We can also turn it on from here by turning that on. Obviously, we have all our gain and information like that. We can go basically down the row. We can turn our filter wheel, show that. We can change the filter from here. And again, we can do it in the equipment section as well by doing the drop down. You can name your filters as well, of course. So basically you have all the same tabs there that you have in equipment, but it just gives you access to it on this section as well. The big thing you probably want to turn on is the guiding, which looks like the PhD2 logo. Just make sure you have your guide information up, and then your star info. So that's going to tell us our half flux radius and all that information that's really important to us. So let's take one more image. It should, yeah, there we go. There's some stars. In fact, I'm actually going to go shorter. So you can see if we zoom in, we've got some stars. We're kind of roughly focused. Probably the double arrow is going to make it a big change, and the single arrow is going to make it a little change. And that's going to be dependent on how big of a focus step you did. So ours is at 200. So the big one will actually move it quite a bit. So there, as you can see, it just got less focused. So I'm going to go the other way, take another shot. That's going to get us more focused. Now I'm going to do a small one, take a shot. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get it close enough so that we can do the polar alignment. You could do an autofocus routine if you want. You know, it's kind of more than we need. I just want to get it close. So I'm going to hit this 2 more times. Got our focus settle time. That's why I'm not able to just click, because I have that 4-second delay that we talked about earlier. So now let's take another shot. Okay, there we go. Those are tight enough to be able to do polar alignment. So that's what I would do next. Click on this little 3-star thing for the 3-point polar alignment. And the one thing that I do is start from current position. Even though I make it this every time, I always have to click it. So I start from there. And then on the Losmandy, if I leave it at 3 degrees per second, it's super slow. If I change it to 5, and then I just hit go. And this is fully automated. So it's going to take an image, plate solve it, move, take an image, plate solve, move, and do it for a 3rd time. And then based on that triangulation, it's going to give us our overall error. And then you'd actually have to go outside, obviously, at that point and manually use the knobs. There are a million videos on how to do that, so I'm not going to waste our time in this one. Most of you guys know how to physically move your mount. Okay, now that it's gone through the 3 steps, it got to its final position, and now it's basically running a loop. And as you can see, we're within 3 minutes. I'm going to probably go out there and maybe tighten that up a little bit, but in all honesty, that's probably plenty fine with auto guiding. So you can see it would keep updating. I have it set on 2-second exposure, so every 2 seconds it's automatically. And if I were to go out there and make an adjustment, you'd see this continually changing and getting closer and closer. So we'll go ahead and hit the stop button. The other thing you can do too, if you're not sure if it is dark enough to actually plate solve, you can just come over here and click on the plate solve icon, change it to 2 seconds, and then you can just hit play. And what it's going to do is it's going to take a 2-second exposure and then plate solve it, and boom, as you can see. So then we know we got polar aligned. We know that our focus is close enough that electronic autofocus would definitely pick it up and be able to, kind of run with it. It doesn't have to be this pinpoint, like these are, fairly good, but you want it to be somewhat close. Otherwise, the autofocus is going to have a hard time getting a really nice tight focus. So the next thing that I usually do, and again, there's other ways to do this. You can go into Stellarvue or use other apps, but I just tend to go into Framing Wizard, and we are shooting M101. We've got quite a bit of data on this. And so you type that in. You want to make sure that you actually, when you find it, you actually want to click on the coordinates underneath, and you want to make sure those coordinates actually change. Sometimes I hit M101 and just hit enter because I saw it kind of appear, but you actually want to click on the coordinates. And then the field of view, I have to 4 degrees. I'm at 960 millimeters. So that gives me this, rectangle for my field of view plus, a decent amount around, plenty of room to actually frame it if I wasn't totally sure. As you can see, we've got some wiggle room, and you can frame it just like you would any other tool. And then if you want to, you can go ahead and just slew and center, and that's going to take you now to that area. All right, now that it's finished slewing, if you want to determine the rotation, you can by hitting determine rotation from camera. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to add the target to sequence. Now, if you want to add multiple targets, you would start with adding 1. And then this is where you're going to use one of the templates. Once you download the templates, all you want to do is go into your file explorer, go into N.i.n.a, and then go under templates, and then go ahead and copy and paste or drag and drop there. So if you had them download to your downloads area, if they are in here, you just go ahead and drag and drop them into the N.i.n.a and templates folder, and that way when you go to select the advanced sequencer option, all of these should show up. So I'm going to shoot this in LRGB, and I do have my camera rotator set up, so I'm going to do plus rotate. That way it will actually slew, center, and rotate. And so this might look a little bit confusing, but we're going to go through and it's actually really simple. So we have our target up here. The global triggers, basically the meridian flip is programmed in, the center after drift. So it's going to double check after each exposure that you're within 3 arc minutes. I'm going to change that to 1. And don't worry, you can save all these settings so you don't have to do it again. In Patriot Astro's video where he goes over this, basically he tells you to look through these. They're basically instructions, and then just go ahead and delete them. I always do right away because it makes it look a little bit more complicated. And on the couple templates that I'm going to include that are set up the way I like it, I'm not going to include those instructions because it just makes it look a little bit more complicated to me. Next, we have an equipment check that's going to be performed at 8:29, which was about 15 minutes ago, and then it's going to automatically start at 8:39. It's 8:42, so we got to get going here because we're a couple minutes past. And I might be saying, well, do I have to set that for the exact time? No. If you're after the time that it was going to start, it will just automatically start. I switched to whatever filter I'm going to do first. We've already got the luminance loaded up, so we'll just do that. And then it's going to do an autofocus after filter change, and then after the HFR or half flux radius gets above a 10% increase, and that's with a sample size of 10. So if you want to be maybe a little bit more precise, you could go down to like 5 and 5. I usually drop it to about 6 and leave it at 10% because the autofocus does take, a little bit of time, and I don't want it to get too crazy. And then dither after 10 exposures is his default for LRGB. In SHO, I think he does it after 1. I'm going to do it after 5. And the reason that we do it less often is because we're doing shorter exposures, so we're going to have more frames. This image already has 30 plus hours, so I do not need it dithering every single time. I'll probably go to 6 actually. So you also see dither over here, just ignore that. And then it's going to loop until nautical dawn. So in this case, I'm just going to do one target tonight because if we go to the top, we'll see that when it actually gets dark, it's going to be at about 50 degrees, get its peak at 78, and then at nautical dawn, it'll be around 58. So this is truly a situation where we can just do one target. Thank you, Galaxy Season. So I don't have to figure out in my head the math, like how many is that? It's just going to keep looping. What I can figure out is how many of each do I want it to loop before it switches filters. Now, since it does an autofocus routine every time it switches filters, I usually do bump this up to like 15 or 20 because I'm only doing 2-minute exposures. That is his default, and I am just going to go ahead and leave it at that. Works pretty good for me. I do already have a lot more luminance than I have the RGB. So if you were somebody that was like, well, I always want to have more luminance than RGB, then you could program this to maybe be like 25 or 30 and have these be 10, 10, 10. And then every time it loops around, you'll naturally have 3 or 4x, whatever you want. Now, let's say you want to add more things to it. Well, that's totally fine. What I do is I have it go to home at the end. So right now it just has it stop guiding and wherever it left off, which in this case would probably be fine. It'd be pointing about 50, 5 degrees in the sky. I'm at 42 degrees, so that's pretty close. It wouldn't be that bad. I have it go ahead and find home, and then I have it close the flat panel. So there it is. Okay. Oh, where'd it go? Close flat panel cover. And if I wanted to, I could do trained dark or flat exposures. And I'll show you guys at the end how to do flats. And if you do have an automated flat panel, you can have it actually use the information it took from the last set of flats And when it closes that flat panel, you can have it turn the light on, do your flats, your dark flats. So when you wake up, everything's ready to go. But we don't need to get that fancy this time. I'm just gonna have it find home, close the flat panel cover, and then you can even park it if you want. So basically, it's going to keep an eye on everything. If it gets out of whack, it's going to make sure that it recenters it because of this up here. We're going to get the autofocus. If it gets out of line by more than 10%, which in HFR, 10% might sound like a lot, but that's just, let's say I'm getting 2.9. If it goes to 3.3, which is still pretty within reason, it's going to run an autofocus routine and try to dial that in. And it's going to run until it needs to stop, because after nautical dawn, we're going to have some light coming in from the sun, and we don't want that ruining our exposures. There are a million different things that you can go in here and mess with. I wouldn't be too afraid, to just kind of add something, especially to the beginning or the end. It's going to be pretty harmless in most cases. If you are nervous, just stand outside and make sure you watch it. But this will allow you to do an entire imaging session. If you wanted to, let's say, add a second target, like let's say I wanted to do, I'm gonna embarrass myself if I don't have this memorized, the Crescent Nebula in the morning. I can load that image. I can make sure that I'm set up with the rotation that I want. Okay, so here it is. I probably wouldn't leave it that rotation, so I can kind of look and see, yeah, maybe I'd want it like there at 290, and I'd want to do it more like that. I could add target to sequencer, mono LRGB rotate, and it's simply just going to add it right below. Now you might be saying, well, the other one said it was going to shoot until dawn. That's totally fine. What we're going to do is we're just going to change that end time. Instead of nautical dawn, we're going to actually select time. And let's say we want to do, let's say we don't know what time. So how would we figure that out? Well, let's go over here and look. When does it get, let's say, above 40 degrees? At 3 a.m., it's right at 40. And then we can shoot until, nautical dawn. So we could say, we could go to here. We could say we're going to loop this until 3 a.m. 00, and then again we can delete this and delete this, and then we can have this start at 3, let's just call it, really you could just make it a second after, but 3:01, and then we're going to go to SHO. I would have done SHO, but you get the point. We could have added a second one, and then what I'd want to do is I'd want to trash these and then move those down to the bottom. But what I'm actually going to do is just go ahead and trash all of this, because I've already got one saved. So I just hit the load, my M101 final. So once it loads, I know I've got all of the settings that I already want in there. It's going to stop guiding, find home, park scope, and close the cover. Once you know everything is the way you want it, just go ahead and hit go like I already have. And what it'll do is it'll slew to the target. It will start guiding, which it already has. And then it will run an autofocus routine, which it just did. So there's our last autofocus routine. And then as you can see, it has guiding going, and there is our first image coming in. If you're setting up PhD2 for the first time, let's go ahead and run that. I did want to get imaging before I spent too much more time. If it is your first time setting up guiding, we're going to go into PhD2. Mine just started going because I had the auto restore. The first thing that I really recommend is just clicking on the brain, which is the advanced settings, and just make sure everything's set up. I don't really change a lot in these, honestly. I go under camera, make sure that the pixel size is correct for my camera, and then I change if you want to do auto exposure, the min and max of 1 and 5 is pretty good. I'd probably drop the max down from 5. That's a little bit slow in my opinion, but you can do whatever you want. Under guiding, I checked the use multiple stars and then made sure that my focal length was in there, which automatically determines your calibration step. If you do want to go to advanced and change it to bin 2, it will of course adjust then that step size. So you can see if I go to bin 2, it makes it quite a bit bigger because of the change in my imaging scale. But we're going to leave it on bin 1 and hit OK. And then there are different algorithms you can use. I just left it on the generic one. There are some things that if we go to view and we look at the actual graph, display graph, there are some settings in here. I did turn down the aggression quite a bit. So the aggression I think was much higher than 45 and 45. As you can see, we're getting 0.35 guiding out of the G11. It's doing a great job. The HYS is a history. It's basically how much the previous guide pulse should be applied. 10 is the default. If you increase the number, it should smooth out those guiding impulses because it takes into consideration the previous guide impulse. And then this N.i.n.a is how many pixels must the star move to trigger a guide pulse change. The default is 0.20. I left it there. If you wanted to make it a little bit more sensitive, I believe you would bump that down. And then if you do get an error sometimes on the length of the pulse for the RA or DEC, you can increase this, probably more of something for longer focal lengths, but at 960 millimeters even with 2500, I'm pretty good to go. I'm just doing 1 second guiding. And if you want to adjust the brightness, you just go ahead and go over here. I will pause guiding really quick just to show you how to connect to your equipment. You're gonna, that little cable there, and then just choose your camera and the mount in the drop down and then hit connect. As you can see, when it says disconnect, you know you're connected. You hit the circle arrows and then you hit the little star. It'll find them, hit the green means go button, and you are PhD2 or push here dummy guiding, and it's going to go back into business. So then from here, you know, you pretty much are good for the night. It's going to monitor everything. It's going to keep track of all of your exposures. You can go through and check them and see the progress. If you don't care about seeing those, you can turn that off. If I don't care about my autofocus, I can turn that off. You can start to consolidate some of those things, and maybe you just want to look at the star data. You can, you know, obviously look at some of the different things with aberration inspector. You know, there's a bunch of different little tools in here that you can play around with in terms of your star detection options, the results, aberration inspector, all of these other little gadgets and gizmos. But this one really is just to get you guys up and running. If you do want to make any fine-tune adjustments on all of your equipment, you're able to do it. And for me, this imaging section is basically kind of my command center or my control panel. Close that out. If you ever are missing the image, this top left one should bring it back for you. And of course, you can scroll in and out on that. But basically, you can command anything on the rig kind of from this once you've got everything going. If you want to change this from arc seconds to pixels on guiding, you can do that. If, let's say, you were messing around with it and you want to clear it out, you can clear it and it'll do that. And then you can even see your PhD2 info and it'll show you the star it's tracking. It's basically everything from there. So that's really how to get everything going. I literally took you guys with me through an entire start to finish to get an imaging session going. Tomorrow we'll do the flat panel and get the flats going and show you how to do that with the Flat Wizard feature. And that way we'll be pretty much ready to go. You'll know how to shoot your calibration frames and your lights and get everything going with N.i.n.a. All right, here it is the next day, and it's time to do calibration frames. Now, the beautiful thing about having a flat panel that's motorized is at the end of imaging, it closes and keeps your scope protected until you wake up. And then the other thing is, once we put the telegizmo on, we can now do all of our calibration frames without having to go back outside to put an LED panel on, take it off, put the scope cover on to do darks. We can do it all from the comfort of inside, which is really nice. Those of you that have done that dance when it's really cold or really hot, know it'd be really nice to just sit here with N.i.n.a, turn everything on remotely, sip your cup of morning coffee, and just do it all from the comfort of inside. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna use N.i.n.a to control the brightness of the panel so that we can hit our target 2-second flat time, or you can also set it to a static brightness and then tell N.i.n.a to figure out the exposure time. You can do it either way. We're gonna shoot our flats and then we'll go ahead and turn the light off and shoot our darks and our dark flats, and it'll be really simple. And so I'm gonna take you through that process right now. All right, so once you establish the remote connection again through remote desktop, we're gonna open N.i.n.a, and then we need to connect the things necessary for calibration frames. In this case, obviously we need to turn on the camera, and I do the camera first because the electronic filter wheel is connected through that. and make sure the sensor cooling is starting to go. And then we're going to connect the filter wheel next. And then I'm going to do all 3 filters, so just take note of which order they're in. And then obviously we need to turn on the flat panel. Now, if you are just setting this up for the first time, the way you want to do it is you actually want to use the motor to power and communicate as a hub for the light. So you'll plug the motor directly into the Eagle and then the light into the motor from both a power standpoint and a USB connectivity, and then there'll be a USB going from the motor into the mount. And then you're going to hit this little gear here and make sure that these are set up appropriately. So you have the light here on the upper left, and then below it the alto motor. So you need to pick the correct ports for each one. It may take you a little bit of trial and error, or you can look up the diagram to see which port is which on the Eagle. So once you do that and you set it correctly, you go ahead and power that on. You'll know that you did it correctly because you'll get the cover to open and close. If you just do the light, then it won't give you the option to open and close the motor. That's what happened to me at first. And so I had to switch it around a little bit. And then you'll see over here this binning and filter gain. This is going to be for the from the flat wizard to let us know. You see it opens that automatically, and this will store those times so that if we did want to do, you know, dark flats or whatever, we know what those times are. And then once we have all that open, we're just going to go ahead and go into flat wizard. And then there are some settings that I have changed. So I changed it to 20 and then 20 dark flats. I do it under dynamic exposure, which means that I set the panel brightness. So I set it to 75. You'll notice on the Giotto, if you turn it on in the equipment section here, and the levels at something like under 50 even, you almost can't see it. So it goes really dim, which is nice because if you want to set a longer flat time, you need a really dim light. But for me, most of my range with the narrow band is going to be between 50 and 100. Those are good settings. So I just kind of set it at 75. And then I hit the toggle switch, obviously, to turn it on. I'm assuming Flat Wizard would probably do that for us, but I did just go ahead and turn it on to be safe. And then I'm going to go into multi-mode and make sure that all 3 of my filters are turned on, and then go back into single. So I have HA first. The minimum exposure is obviously 0. If you have a camera that requires maybe a 2-second exposure, you can put 2, and that way it'll give us a warning and say, hey, we calculated it, you basically have to turn the light up, or we're not going to be able to hit the value that you wanted with a 2-second exposure. And then I put the max of 10. And then the brightness, again, 75. And then I changed it from 50% to 45, so just to the left of center. And then the mean tolerance was at 10%. I dropped it down to 3, and I might even go to 2, just because I want it to be pretty tight in terms of how different they are from flat to flat. I don't want to see a big shift in brightness. So then I'm going to hit play, and it's going to run some calculations. If you have the ASI Air, this is similar to doing the auto mode. Instead of changing the light brightness, though, we're changing the duration. You can do dynamic brightness and set the exposure time, let's say 4 seconds, and then it will change the brightness of the light. But this one, I'm just going to keep it static at 75 and then let it adjust. So you can see the 2.18 seconds gave us 20.54. So we're obviously going to have to go a little bit longer than that to get up to the 29,000 we're aiming for. And then it's going to just run through and go through each one. So now it's doing all 20 of the HA, and then it will do the other 2 filters after that. All right, guys, all we have left now to quickly do is darks. You're just going to go back into Advanced Sequencer. We don't really need a template here, although you can save one. And we're just going to change it to -10 Celsius. You can do that here, but you can also do that in the Equipments tab, or whatever temperature you want to set that to, and that's going to go ahead and trigger the camera to start cooling. And then we'll just go ahead and fast forward. Basically what I've done is you can either load smart exposures, but you'll see an error message. That's because smart exposures do check for dithering, guiding conditions, things like that. So if you want to do it another way, or the simplest way, you can just go to take many exposures. You don't want to do just take exposure because it won't allow you to change it to more than one. So I'm just going to do 3. I'm building a little bit of a dark library here with a new camera. So I'm going to do 20, 20, 20, and then I'm going to do 120, 180, and 300 seconds. And then the final thing I'm going to do is just change them all to darks, and then go ahead and hit play. So as you can see, very simple, and that's going to basically do it for the episode. We've kind of gone through and shown you how to do your lights, calibration, frames, and really, I know it seems like it's a little bit complicated, and it is a little bit more learning up front, but as you saw at the beginning, once you have it down, I just have my templates for SHO and LRGB. I have one for a single target and then also for multiple targets. I literally just go in, change the targets and the times, and hit play. When it's the second night, if all things are the same, I literally just load it up, hit play, and I go. It really couldn't be any easier. I could consider doing a third short video if there are any remaining questions, so let me know. If you are still watching, please give the video a like and subscribe. And if you haven't joined the Dark Rangers Inc. community group, please consider doing so. Other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate all of you, and until the next one, as always, clear skies.